Well, hello again. Welcome again to another episode of Down to Earth but Heavenly Minded. First thing I want to do is apologize. Kind of losing my voice. I've had a sore throat, but I'm not going to talk much, at least not in this video. But the video I'm going to show you, I talk in. Well, I made a video just here a short time ago. I was inspired to do this video, that first video, by an atheist. And because of the questions I was being asked and comments, I had to make a part two. So this is what I'm going to say. I have the answer to the question or questions that many of you have asked. Proof that God exists. Well, I'm going to give you my proof. Now, you can either believe it or not believe it. But I'm telling you, this is the truth. So with that said, I'm going to turn my welcome off. I'm going to turn my video on. I'm going to start my video. And so with that said, just listen to what I have to say. Well, hello again. And uh, it's early in the morning, and I just felt led to make this video. I've been dealing with a sore throat, so hopefully my voice will hold out long enough. But I made a video here just a few days ago or whatever it was, and I kind of addressed it to some atheists. And I was inspired to make that video because of some questions that were asked me. Excuse me. I need some coffee this morning. Well, by the way, this background is my front yard. Uh, I really got a beautiful front yard. It's right on the Mississippi. I've been very blessed for this. I ended up coming up here because I wanted to fish the river commercially, which I did. I'll get a little more into that here in this story. But seeing that this video is kind of keyed towards atheists, those that do not believe that there is a God or that he even exists, the question is always asked me, why, or how can I prove that God exists? I usually find out that when an atheist asks me these questions, he's already has a mindset that there is no God, no matter what I say to him or what evidence I send them, they're not going to believe it anyway, and that's usually the case. But I do have some proof, and you cannot refute this proof because this proof is me. And I'm going to tell you why. Let's go back to when I was just a young kid. My mother was a Catholic and she married a divorced man. And because of this, she was excommunicated from the Catholic Church. At the time, I didn't really think much of it, but later on in life, as I got older, I realized what an hypocrisy this whole thing was. That my mother was a good Catholic woman. She believed in God and she went to church. She practiced the things of the church and stuff, but they didn't accept her. Well, my mother and my father died 3 months apart. My dad died first. And before my mother died, which was 3 months later, her sisters, my aunts, brought the Catholic priest to the house. and accepted my mother back into the church because my father was dead. And I just thought to myself, you bunch of hypocrites. So I was really turned off on religion per se. And in a way, this was a good thing because religion is not the answer. So anyway, I went about my life. I had gone through the military. I was in the Air Force, and I got myself in all kinds of trouble. I went AWOL and ended up being thrown in the stockade, and I got into a lot of other trouble. And even before that, when I was a kid, I was a delinquent. I was always in trouble. Well, I thought going into the military would change me, but it didn't. In fact, it made me worse. I got in with the wrong crowd, and I took up drinking, and I did other things that weren't right, and um, I was a bad guy. I was a bad dude. Well, after I got out of the service, I got married, and after my parents died, we inherited the house. I have a sister, so she got half the house, and I got half the house, so I had to take a loan out to pay her half off, which was fine. I did that, and I had plenty of equity in the house. So anyway, what happened was I was working for American Motors at the time. That was before they sold out to Chrysler. I was living in Milwaukee, and what happened was uh, I invested some money in a bar. So my wife and me ran this bar. We called it the Office. It was kind of a unique name because the guys that would stop in, they would always tell their wives, "Well, I got stuck at the office." So we laughed about it, but we did a lot of drinking. My wife and me back then, we were both drinkers, and uh, I got to be honest with you, it was party time all the time. But the money was rolling in. I was making good money. This was a small bar, 21 stool bar, but that place was packed every night. And we had a crowd, a regular crowd that would come in there, and it was like a family almost. And we enjoyed one another, and but it was a lot of drinking and a lot of partying all the time. And I kind of got hooked on some drugs. At that time, it was unusual. I was smoking pot and doing drugs and drinking. And what happened was my wife and me were starting to have marital problems. She was tending bar, and I was kind of jealous. My wife, when she was younger, she was really good looking, and I was kind of jealous of her. And guys would flirt with her, and she started running around on me. Well, to make a long story short, I started running around on her. So it was a two-way street. And one night, we split up, and I was living in a small apartment. And after the bars closed one night, she brought the money to me because I used to handle the money all the time. And she knocked on the door and opened the door, and she was standing there. And it just so happens I had a woman there with me. So it turned out that I was caught red-handed. Well, neither one of us was faithful. So anyway, one night, short time after that, I was sitting in the bar. I'd closed the bar, and I was drinking. I had a bottle of brandy. I drank almost the whole bottle by myself. And I started taking pills. Before you know it, I passed out. Well, my wife and her boyfriend came in, found me passed out at the bar, and they rushed me to the hospital. They pumped my stomach out. And they had a shrink come in and talk to me, and he tried to tell me I had a problem, and I tried to tell him he was nuts. I didn't have any problems. I didn't want to listen to anybody. Well, after I got out of the hospital, I decided it's time to pull up stakes and relocate. So that's what I did. What you're looking at behind me is the Mississippi, and this is where I relocated. And I wasn't right in this spot at the time, but I went and stayed with my wife's younger sister. And the reason I did that is when her younger sister was real young, she came and lived with us. And I raised her, and she was almost like a daughter to me, not a sister-in-law. Well, I didn't stay with her very long because I wanted to move and get closer to the river. And I was in Wisconsin. That's if you go across that bridge that you're looking at, that goes into Wisconsin. So I moved from Wisconsin to Minnesota. And when I left Milwaukee, I left everything. Material things didn't matter to me. It was just stuff. When I left the house, I left the business, I left the car, I left the motorcycle, a camper, but I took my boat and I took my Jeep. I had a Jeep, and that was the love of my life. That Jeep, it was a CJ7 Renegade. It was blue with a Levi top, Levi interior, Tractor AT tires, white spoke wheels, 102-inch white whip antenna, CB radio, 2 Bear decals on the doors. I loved that Jeep. That was it. I bought it right off the truck when I worked for America Motors, and they were making Jeeps then. Turns out that I couldn't pay for the Jeep. I was still had payments on it. Money was not coming in like it used to. Oh, I was doing all right. I ended up renting a little cabin behind a bar, and I had a big stock tank on the porch, and I used to sell willow cats. And a willow cat looks like a little bullhead, and they're just dynamite bait for walleye. So I used to sell these things, and I used to get $1 a piece for them, and that was pretty good. That was a good part of my income. Plus, I was taking $100 to $120 worth of fish over to the fish house over in Pepin, Wisconsin. I used to sell my fish, and I used to mostly deal with catfish. I never dealt with any carp or any of the other fish. Excuse me a minute. I'm going to pause for a minute here. I just had a cough, and I didn't want to cough in your ears. Well, anyway, getting back to the story, I was doing okay. But the problem is I was drinking every night. And when I came up here, the only person that came up with me was my oldest son and his friend, our neighbor, and they helped me fish the river. And well, Bob ended up moving to Arizona, I guess, so it was just me and my son. And then one night we went out bar hopping with my Jeep, and I wasn't driving, another guy was driving, and I was in the back, and we had the top rolled up, and I was sitting up on the top of the back seat, and I was hanging onto the roll bar. But the guy sitting next to me, he was hanging onto that little aluminum bar that holds the top, and he leaned out, and the bar come out of the fixture, and he was falling out, and I reached for him, and we both ended up going out of the Jeep, doing 55 miles an hour. And when you slide down on a paved road, especially in a t-shirt, and I managed to get on my back, but this other guy got his face all up. But I had no hide left on my back. So anyway, we were sitting on the side of the road, and of course the cops got involved, and there was drinking, and so my friend ended up in jail when I was driving my Jeep. So I went to court, lied through my teeth and got him off. Told him that we weren't drinking until after the accident. Well, turns out things were slowing down. The season was over for fishing, so like my wife always said, I had to get a real job. Well, actually, running the river was a real job. It was sunrise to sunset. It was a hard job, but I loved it. It was outdoors, and I really enjoyed it. Well, it turns out that I got a job making camper tops for pickups. I was doing pretty good. Now, one day I went to work, and there was no work. Let me back up a little bit. I kind of missed something here. My wife ended up coming up to visit us, and she had fallen off a motorcycle. She was on crutches. And here I was sleeping on silk sheets. And meanwhile, before she came up, she sent all the kids. So I had all 6 kids plus myself. And then when my wife came up, and I was still living in this 2-room shack. So we had to find a new place. So I found a place over in Reed's Landing. And now we'll go back to when I was working for the camper place. And I come to work one day, and there was a big sign on the door, closed. Well, I was out of a job. So I'm heading home. It's only about 3 miles. And while I'm driving down the highway, this crazy noise came out. Clunk, clunk, clunk. And I ended up on the side of the road and got out. Turned out I threw a rod through the side of the block. It was 22 below zero. Well, I ended up walking home. Told my wife, I says, what happened? I lost the job. Told her the car threw a rod. Well, it wasn't a short time after that. We got behind on our bills and couldn't pay the rent. We were running low on groceries. I got evicted. Here, me and my wife and 6 kids were getting kicked out. And somebody said, well, they can't do that to you. Well, they did. The sheriff came and they moved all my furniture and kids' clothes, dishes, everything, and they moved it all out. But before this happened, I ran out of fuel oil. Like I said, it was 22 below. So what I ended up doing is I put a space heater in one room, put a mattress on the floor. In fact, I think I had a mattress in a small one. And our whole family slept in that room in our winter coats. And when you walked out of that room, you could see your breath. I poured antifreeze in the back of the toilet and in a bowl so it wouldn't freeze up and crack. The only thing I had left to eat in the house was popcorn. Well, it was one heck of a Christmas that year. Kids didn't get much. Well, that's when my life changed. I'm a man that always provided for my family. I never, never had a problem with money. And my kids always had clothes on their backs, food in their bellies. So I thought I was a good father, but I really neglected my kids when I had that bar and I drank. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I really see how bad I was. Well, after one morning, I was laying on the mattress with the kids and the wife, and I got up and I went in the living room. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't really have a whole lot of friends. I just knew a few people from the bar and no family. So something just made me reach out to a God. Now, I was like most atheists. I wasn't sure whether there was a God or not. So here's what I prayed. Lord, if you're out there, that was a faithless prayer. I said, Lord, you're the only one that can help. That's pretty well my prayer. So I got myself ready and I hiked 3 miles into town and I went to the bank. And I went in and I said, I'd like to talk to the president of the bank. Well, they said, what's it about? I said, I just want to talk to him. So they got him and I went in and I knew him from around town and stuff. So his name was John. I went in and talked to him. I said, John, I said, I'm going to lay my cards on the table. Here's the situation. And I told him everything that was happening. And I says, I need a small loan. I says, if it's the last thing I do, you're going to get that money back with interest. Well, after listening to me, he says, he said, do you have anything for collateral? And I says, a car or anything? I said, yeah, it's sitting on the side of the road. Says, it's probably towed off by now. I said, the rod came through the side. Well, he said, how in the world are you going to come look for a job or anything? I said, I walked into town. I said, I got 2 legs. I'll find a job. So anyway, he said, for some reason, I just think you're going to pay me back. And he says, against all our policies. But he said, I'll give you a small loan. It was enough to get my stuff out of Hawk and buy a few groceries. So I ended up leaving the bank. I walked right around the corner and I went into a realtor's office. And I knew the realtor from the bars. And I went in, his name is Marco. I said, Marco, how you doing? And I sat down and laid my cards on the table, told him exactly the same thing I told the banker. And he found me a place to stay. He called the guy from Chicago, had a house that he was selling, and said it's only temporary. But we went up and looked at it. And first thing I noticed, it had a fireplace. Wow, I got heat anyway. So anyway, I got to move in there, and I got a hold of a guy that was a plumber. He had a small truck, and the last few things that we still had left yet, we packed them up and headed over there. And then we went to the storage, got my stuff out of storage and moved that in the house. And it was only, I think it was probably the next day, as I remember, somebody from the bar I knew came and knocked on the door and said, they've been trying to get a hold of you up in Lake City. He says, you applied for a job up there and they want you to start. Wow. I said, that was quick. But I didn't have any way to get there. And it was about 15 miles. I knew I was going to walk 15 miles. But I got up early the next morning. I got on the highway, stuck my thumb out. The first car to come by stopped. It was a bunch of guys going to the place that I was supposed to start working. And I told them, I said, I didn't have a car, but I says, I'm supposed to start up here. Well, they said, you can ride with us. And then when you get straightened out, you can drive, we carpool. Well, I thought that was a great idea. So anyway, things worked out. So I started riding with them. I had a job. Things were looking up again. But every time we drive on Friday nights when we come home, we'd go up over the hill. We'd stop and we'd buy some beer and we'd all have a beer. And as we're driving home, we were all drinkers, and so was I. But on the way back, I was thinking about how God answered that prayer. And I thought, well, maybe there is a God out there. And I thought, well, I think I'm going to try to find out who this God is. Well, I could have went out and borrowed a Bible. There are a lot of free Bibles out there. But going back to when I was in the military, my mother being a Catholic, I bought her one of them big Catholic Bibles with all the pictures in it. Well, when I left Milwaukee, like I said, I left everything. Well, we lost everything, lost the house, we lost everything. That didn't bother me. But I kept thinking about that big Bible I bought my mom. So one of my daughter's boyfriends was living up in Minneapolis, and he was going back to Milwaukee, and he was staying with his brother in Minneapolis. And I asked my daughter to ask him if he would go into the old house and see if he could find it. I told him exactly where the Bible was. There was an archway between a living room and a dining room, and there was two wardrobes, one on each side, and then one on the right. Now, if you're facing it, was on the left. There was two doors, and the Bible was sitting up in there. But when he went back to Milwaukee, the whole house was boarded up. Kids had gotten in there and they vandalized it, and they took everything that wasn't nailed down. They even took the plaster off the walls. It was just a wreck. Well, he went right where I told him that Bible was. He opened the cupboard, and there that Bible sat untouched. That was a miracle. I would think somebody would probably have stolen it and tried to sell it. So anyway, he brought it back, but he took it up to the cities and sat in the garage, his brother's garage. Well, it was killing me. I wanted to have that Bible. So by then I had bought another car. And I ran up there and I got the Bible. And I started reading it. I started in the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Fine, I learned all this stuff in Sunday school, and even though I listened a little bit while I was there. But didn't make any sense. I just didn't know what to do. But there was a guy at work. They used to call him the preacher. And I went up to him. His name was Dale. I said, Dale, I'm reading the Bible. Oh, his eyes got as big as $half. Yeah, he said, that's great. He said, where are you reading? I said, I started in the beginning. He says, that's good. I says, I've been reading through Genesis. No. He says, starting the Gospel of John. I says, well, you said start in the beginning. He said, that is the beginning. I said, I don't know what this guy's talking about. But I got home and I opened up the Bible. And I opened it up to the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In the beginning. Well, I said, this guy must know what he's talking about. So I started through John. Now, seeing I didn't like Sunday school, I also didn't like school. And my English was very bad. Reading and writing was not my big suit. I loved math, but I didn't love English. But I had trouble reading, but I stuck with it. Took me a little while to get through the first 3 chapters. But when I got to chapter 3, it says there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus. He was a ruler of the Jews. The same came to Jesus by night. And he says, Rabbi or Master, we know that you come from God. For no man can do the things that you do unless God is with him. But then the Lord said this. Now, Nicodemus was a religious man, and he didn't know any of this stuff. The Lord said to him, marvel not that I say to you, you must be born again. Well, I didn't understand what he meant, and neither did Nicodemus. Well, Nicodemus says, how can a man be born again when he's old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? Well, it sounds like a stupid question, but it's the same question I would have asked. It was almost like I was having this conversation with the Lord. At the time, I didn't even realize it. But God's word was inspired. Men penned these words as they were inspired by the Holy Spirit. And it was the Spirit of God that was talking to me. Like I say, I didn't know this. I struggled with it. I didn't understand. The Lord said, that which is born of spirit is spirit, that which is born of flesh is flesh. So I did understand that he was talking about two births, a physical birth and a spiritual birth. Not that I understood everything. But he said something to Nicodemus that made me start to think. He said, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. What? What in the world is he talking about? I didn't know anything about this. Well, later on, as I was reading and trying to understand, I found a story in the book of Numbers, chapter 21, where the people were grumbling and complaining. They wanted to go back to Egypt. They wanted all the good food. And they didn't want to live in the wilderness anymore. And so the Lord sent these poisonous snakes among them, and they were biting the people, and they were dying. Well, the people came to Moses and they said, go to God and pray that he gets rid of these snakes. So Moses went to God and he prayed. Well, God said to Moses, no, I'm not going to get rid of the snakes, but I want you to make a bronze serpent and put it on a pole and stick it in the ground. And when anybody looked to that snake, if they were bit by these poisonous snakes, they would live. Well, it took faith. They had to believe what God said to Moses. Now, the people didn't hear it from God himself, but they heard it from Moses. And Moses related it to them, just like I'm relating this to you. God is not speaking to you, but I am. And I'm telling you what God is saying. And he said this to me. Marvel not that I say to you, you must be born again. So when these people were bit by the snakes, they looked at this bronze serpent and they lived. Now there had to be some that didn't believe. And they didn't look and they died. And that's exactly the way it is now. So just as Moses did this, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. He was talking about Christ being crucified on a cross. Look and live. There's a song that's like that. Look and live. Well, that's the answer. Look and live. And you'll be born again. You'll be born spiritually. And a lot of people, especially atheists, they say it's a bunch of hogwash. Well, I'm telling you, it took me a while. About 3 months, I struggled with this. I didn't know what to do. Well, one day I was at work and I started becoming a man of prayer. I was talking to God a lot. And I would talk to him just like I'm talking to you. And I was standing by this old greasy machine and I was running some parts or setting up, I don't remember. But I said, you know, Lord, I really want to be saved. You know, I've been trying everything. I'm at the end of my wits. I don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, a light came on. I just said it out of my mouth. Lord, I'm trying. That was the answer. I said, Lord, I'm going to stop trying and I'm going to start trusting. That was the very moment that I put my trust in the Lord, just like those people believed in that serpent that was on that pole, and they lived. Later on, they had to destroy that serpent because people started worshiping it. They made it an idol. Well, I don't have any idols. The only thing I have is the cross of Christ. I put my faith and trust in what he did for me. Simply to the cross I cling. Nothing in my hands I bring. That's the answer. Just come as you are. I don't care how bad a sinner you are, how bad a person you are. I was bad, but Christ accepted me. Even the Apostle Paul said he was the chief of sinners, and God received him. So, what I'm trying to get across to you atheists out there is until you come to the Lord and give your life to him, you're never going to understand God. Truly understand. Religion is not the answer. Religion is man's way of trying to reach God. Christianity is God's way of reaching us. God the Father sent his Son, Jesus Christ, into the world and sent him to the cross to die for you and for me. That's the answer. Well, that's all I got to say to you is put your faith and trust in Christ. And I guarantee you won't be an atheist anymore. Now, I could go on and tell you story after story how God answers my prayers. I'm praying for you atheists out there. And I really believe that some of you are going to come to the saving knowledge of Christ. Maybe not all of you, because we got stubborn hearts. I just want to throw a dig at you right now. In the Bible, this is not me saying this. This is God saying this. Only a fool would say in his heart, there is no God. So is he calling you a fool? I don't care how wise you are or how much worldly knowledge you have. If you don't believe in God, God is saying you're a fool. But you don't have to be a fool. Put your faith in Jesus Christ. Bye for now. Okay, that's it. I hope you understand what I was trying to say in this video. I'm going to end right here. But truly, I am praying that God will touch your hearts, that you will come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. Bye for now.